What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today we are throwing it back to the Titan with another build, taking it to Stasis this time with the new exotic helmet, Cadmus Ridge Lancecap. Now this thing gives us improved diamond lances, so these things are buffed to the moon, creating stasis crystals at those points. And with this build here, we are getting an infinite amount of those, especially since we're getting them via this helmet as well as our aspect, and we're just able to spam our stasis abilities, making this a huge support class using some very special weapons as well. So starting out right here for our abilities, aspects, and fragments, we are using our Rally Barricade to pair with that Cadmus Ridge Lancecap. Now say that 5 times fast. Next off, we got our Strafe Lift for our jump, as well as our Shiver Strike that helps us break all those stasis crystals, which we use very often inside of this build. Next off, I'm opting for the Dusk Field Grenade 1 because it slows enemies and works for our overload champions. Plus, with how this build is working, that nice slow is a good ad clear and ad management for this build, since we're having stasis crystals everywhere else. That's why I went with this instead of something like the Glacial Grenade. Now, when we move on to our aspects, we are going to have Diamond Lance equipped to make this that infinite Diamond Lance build. So when we shatter or defeat targets with stasis abilities or stasis weapons, it creates a stasis lance. We can throw this or slam it on the ground. Now, with this build, we're going to try to throw them mostly because of that exotic helmet. That's how it works with creating that stasis crystal. Plus, this is going to be able to stop unstoppable champions as well. Now, when we move on to our second aspect, we're going to be using Tectonic Harvest, very important for the endgame aspect of this build and survivability. So shattering all of those stasis crystals that we're creating create stasis shards. When we pick these up, it grants us melee energy for us and our allies, so that is super nice. Like I said, it's a big support build for this stasis. Plus, with our fragments, these give us some overshields, as you will see in a second. Now, like I said, with all of those stasis crystals being everywhere and freezing enemies with our diamond lances, we're creating those stasis shards on breaking those crystals, which they then track to our position as well with Whisper of Conduction here. Next off, for our fragments, we have Whisper of Durance, so our slow from our abilities last longer, and for those abilities that linger, they also have an increased duration. So this bad boy, our Dust Field Grenade, which we're going to have back very often, is going to last longer, as well as that slow on enemies will last longer. Now, next off, number 3 is Whisper of Fissures, so the increase of damage and size of the burst of those stasis crystals when we destroy them or frozen targets. And as you'll see, we have that frozen targets via our dust field, via our weapons, as well as those diamond lances that we are getting infinitely with this build. Next off right here, Whisper of Rhyme, very important. That pairs with our Tectonic Harvest and all of those stasis shards that are tracking to our position. We get that overshield, which falls off after 10 seconds, but collecting additional shards revamps that overshield, and you'll see we basically always have it because of the amount of stasis crystals that we're breaking and creating with this build. And last but certainly not least, we are using Whisper of Shards, so when we shatter those stasis crystals, we get a boost in grenade recharge. Shattering those crystals also increase the benefit when we do it often, so that is why I said we're getting our dust field back very quickly and consistently, being able to throw this around, freezing and slowing targets like crazy, which then create more of those stasis crystals, allowing us to proc this and all of our fragments and aspects very easily. Now, moving on to our weapons right here, very special, like I said, for a few reasons. Our kinetic is insane for creating those stasis crystals, which we'll be able to use to proc our fragments and aspects, creating those stasis shards, getting that overshield, getting our grenade back, proccing diamond lances. It's insane. Plus, we're able to cover our last champion with barrier and our glaive and those volatile rounds. So first off, we're using the new exotic from this season, a kinetic stasis bow called Verglass Curve. Now this has the perks Hailstorm and Shiver Quiver. So that Hailstorm is stasis arrows freeze targets on contact and create stasis crystals when affecting the environment. So we're using those to create stasis shards and proc all of our aspects and fragments for the stasis subclass. Also with Shiver Quiver, freezing targets grants the weapon faster draw speed for a short period of time. That is part of that exotic catalyst. Now next off, we're moving to the Ecliptic Distaff. This is our seasonal weapon with replenishing Aegis and destabilizing rounds, so we can get that volatility easy by picking up orbs with our mods on our artifact, which I'll show you in a second. Plus this thing creates destabilizing rounds by itself, and those void explosions can also stun those champions. Plus with a glaive, you are able to block a good amount of damage and stay alive in that endgame content. And last but certainly not least, another stasis weapon with field prep and Vorpal for that extra damage on bosses in Fire and Forget. It is a nice craftable stasis linear fusion, and we're also using some armor mods to proc some extra damage for stasis weapons, so our bow in this fusion right here. Now moving on to our artifact mods, we really only have two we're using for this build in Volatile Flow, so picking up Orbs of Power grant us volatile rounds for that glaive to give us the anti-barrier, and we're also using medieval champions, so the glaives will also stun those unstoppable champions. Now the Volatile Flow will overtake this at points, and then this will also be active when we don't have Volatile Flow active, so it is a nice way to have all those champions covered, especially since we have stasis to deal with overload and unstoppable by itself. Now when we move on to our armor mods, we're going to be using that 100 Discipline as well as 100 Resilience to get our Rally Barricade fast as well as our Grenade. Now the reason we're using Rally Barricade is this Cadmus Ridge Lancecap. We have Lancer's Visual, so Diamond Lances create stasis crystals on impact when thrown, with more stasis crystals being created by hitting bosses and vehicles. While using our stasis subclass and behind our Rally Barricade, rapid precision hits and combatant final blows will spawn a diamond lance near you when you're using a stasis weapon. So with us using that bow and getting those precision shots, it's very easy to add clear with that weapon, and you will just be continuously spawning those lances at the rally barricade next to you with this helmet, as well as at some of those defeats with our aspect being procced on top of that. So this is insane for the amount of lances that we get, plus they get those stasis crystals on impact, allowing us to get that overshield, get our melee back faster, and also proc the freezing of targets and shatter to get back our grenade faster. Now for the mods on this, we're going to be using Harmonic Siphon, so stasis final blows give us orbs of power, as well as Void Siphon, so those void weapon final blows also give us orbs of power, so all of our weapons when we have rapid defeats are going to give us orbs of power, as well as that heavy ammo finder, which has increased chances to give us heavy on those defeats. So we're going to have that Fire and Forget up at all times for that DPS and that endgame content. Now moving on to our arms right here, we're going to be using Bolstering Detonation, 2 of those, and Momentum Transfer. Now both of these, when we're doing damage with our grenade, it is going to reduce our melee cooldown for Momentum Transfer, and then our Rally Barricade for Bolstering Detonation, and that is one reason why we're using Dusk Field as well, so that continuous tick of the slow when enemies are inside of it will give us that ability energy in our class item, as well as our melee. Next on the list, we have 2 Charged Up, as well as that stasis resistance. So Charged Up allows us to have that armor charge at a max value a little bit higher, which we are using on our boots that you will see in a second by collecting all of those orbs of power that we are having. Now the way that we're using that is with that stasis weapon surge, and we also have stacks on stacks, so when we pick up an orb of power, it's going to give us 2 armor charges instead of 1. Now those armor charges will decay slowly, but give us a nice little bonus to the stasis weapon damage, so our kinetic and our bow as well as our heavy. So we're able to do a nice little bit of extra DPS. Stacking these does increase it, but it looks like only about 5% for each additional one that you have on. So that's why I only stuck with one of these instead of going up, because the base one starts at about 10% increase. Now, last but certainly not least, we're going to be creating even more orbs with that Reaper and throwing down our Rally Barricade and then getting defeats with weapon. Plus, we're getting our Dust Field back by using our class ability, and you'll see we have it back all the time. Now, we're also using time dilation so that armor charge decays slower, or it has a longer timer, I should say, giving us that stasis surge for our weapons even longer, allowing us to have that damage. And you can see we have the dust fields up consistently. We have our rally barricade up consistently. We're freezing everything with those diamond lances, as well as our bow being able to shoot out those stasis crystals when they hit the environment, and freezing targets when you hit them directly. So it is a stasis synergy machine, and it is so nice for that end game content. And like I said, just kind of a support build as well, being able to protect your allies, getting all of that ad management, plus you can do some pretty gnarly damage with that fire and forget linear fusion rifle. So definitely be taking this into some of that end game content with your Stasis Titan here. One of my favorite builds to come out of this season. Like I said, the exotics have been very fun that came out with Lightfall, besides those speed loader slacks for Hunter. Definitely an F tier for exotics, but this right here, throwing it in A just because I love stasis, and these lances are so much fun to have up consistently. So thank you guys again for that crazy support. Truly appreciate it on these build videos. They mean a lot to me, and we'll be doing a lot more of them with this season, as well as those weapon god roll guides. So thank you guys again. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.